أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل صالح إن شاء الله، بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. أما بعد، فقد قال مولانا وإمامنا أبي عبد الله عليه السلام: أما بعد فإني باعث إليكم أخي وابن عمي وثقتي من أهل بيتي مسلم بن عقيل، فإن أخبرني أنه اجتمع رأي الملأ منكم على طاعتنا. آمنا بالله، صدق الإمام عليه السلام. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Historically, when we examine the movement of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salatu was salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, and the reasons behind his movement against Yazid ibn Muawiyah, you find that many historians over the centuries have given different reports, have given different pieces of evidences trying to understand what exactly was the philosophy of Karbala. Why did Imam Husayn alayhi salam stand against Yazid ibn Muawiyah? So from amongst them, some historians came forward and they said that this was a tribal war between the Bani Hashim and the Bani Umayyah. The Bani Hashim and the Bani Umayyah were rivals even in the time of Jahiliyyah. And of course, this intensified after the bi'th of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And much more in the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. But that rivalry between the two tribes, the Bani Umayyah and the Bani Hashim, existed well before even the coming of or the advent of the religion of Islam. Some came forward and they said that this was a political movement, a political motive behind the revolution, as in Abu Abdullah alayhi salam wished to become the caliph, as he was rightfully deserving of the Khilafah, based on what? Based on the peace treaty of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. Now when Imam Hassan signed the peace treaty with Muawiyah, one of the conditions was that if Muawiyah was to die, the Khilafah would come into the hands of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. But Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, he breaks and violates this condition and he hands it over to his son Yazid ibn Muawiyah. So based on this, these historians came forward and they said that Imam al-Husayn knew that it was his right to have control and authority over the Khilafah. And so when he began his movement leading up to the uprising in Kufa and the role of Muslim ibn Aqeel, all of that was because he was deserving of the Khilafah. So they said, and they proposed the second opinion. The third opinion came forward and they said that no, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam wished for Shahadat. Where is the evidence for this? The evidence of this is found in the ahadith, especially before when he leaves Medina. When he leaves the city of Medina, one of the final things that he does is he goes and he visits the ziyarah, he performs the ziyarah of his grandfather, Rasulullah. When he goes towards the grave of his grandfather, he cries, he laments. It's the final time that he will see his grandfather's grave. And they say he becomes, or he sleeps there for a while, he becomes unconscious and he sees his grandfather in his dream. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi approaches his grandson. He says, Ya Abu Abdullah, your mother, your father, your brother Al-Hassan alayhi salam, we are all anxiously waiting for you. Allah has reserved a maqam for you in Jannah which cannot be reached until and unless you give your life, until you become a shaheed, that you give your life in the way of martyrdom for Islam. So here they say that here Imam Husayn alayhi salam wished martyrdom, and there is nothing wrong in this. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam wished for Shahadat. The greatest way to leave this earth or leaving this world is through attaining Shahadat. So he wished for it and therefore he engaged in a whole uprising. So this was the third opinion raised by the ulama. The fourth opinion was, no, this was revenge on behalf of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam had one motive, but the motive of Yazid ibn Muawiyah was revenge, was vengeance. And that's all it was. And this is a very interesting opinion amongst the historians. They say that the Bani Hashim, specifically the Holy Prophet of Islam as well as Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, overpowered the Bani Umayyah in two different ways. Two strategies were used, which were then avenged by both Muawiyah and Yazid. What were these two strategies? Number one, blood, and number two, humiliation. So the Bani Hashim overpowered the Bani Umayyah through blood, where in the Battle of Badr. The Battle of Badr was a significant battle within the religion of Islam. Not just the first, but the most significant. Why? Because all of the casualties from the opposition side were from the hands of Ali alayhi salam. And these were all the senior figures of the Bani Umayyah. So when they were killed by the hands of Ali alayhi salam, that hatred, that intense aggression towards the Imam alayhi salam developed as well. Beyond that, they say after the Battle of Badr, there's an incident that takes place. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi comes over the bodies of the casualties, the mushrikeen, and he says to them, do you not see the truth now? You disobeyed me, you went against me, you opposed me, you fought against me, now you can see the truth. When the opposition saw this, when the Bani Umayyah and the mushrikeen saw the behavior of Rasulullah upon the deaths of their companions, again, according to the thaqaf, according to the culture of the Arabs of the time, this was an insult to them. And they took it very personally. That's why they established hatred towards the Holy Prophet of Islam, and more specifically towards Amir al-Mu'mineen. When they say, why didn't people stand up for the Imam alayhi salam and defend him in Ghadir? It's because naturally they had hatred towards him because of what happened in Badr. Why didn't they, for example, support him when Saqifa took place? The whole reason why Saqifa took place is because they had intense hatred towards the Imam alayhi salam because of what happened in Badr. So the Bani Hashim overpowered the Bani Umayyah because of bloodshed, because of what happened in the Battle of Badr. Then later on, the second way in which the Bani Hashim overpowered the Bani Umayyah was when the conquest of Mecca took place. When the Prophet conquered Mecca, Futuhat al-Mecca, you find the likes of Abu Sufyan, Muawiyah, all of them fell on their knees. And they were forced to come towards the religion of Islam. They knew and they said to themselves, either it is death, the sword, or Islam. And they chose Islam and they entered and embraced the religion of Islam through the mercy of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. That was a point of humiliation for them. Now, when Muawiyah comes into power, his primary role and motive is to avenge his forefathers. Number one, through humiliation, and number two, through blood. Humiliation, what happened? The peace treaty of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. That's what happened. According to Muawiyah, in his vision, he found himself humiliating Imam Hassan alayhi salam because the Imam was forced into a peace treaty. The Imam was forced to hand over the Khilafah to him. So according to Muawiyah's vision, he overpowers the Bani Hashim by humiliating them, by making Imam Hassan sign the peace treaty. But Imam Hassan alayhi salam, being the Imam, knows that he wasn't humiliated. The people, even his own Shias, came towards him and said, why did you sign a peace treaty against Muawiyah? He said, right now you will not see the wisdom, but you will see the wisdom many years later, 1400 years later. Through the peace treaty of Imam Hassan, we prove the kufr of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, and we don't shy away from it. There are those who say that he is from Ahl al-Jannah. We say that he is not from Ahl al-Jannah because he violated each and every clause of the peace treaty. So, from that perspective, Muawiyah believed that he humiliated Imam Hassan alayhi salam. When Yazid comes into power, Yazid does not care for peace treaty. He does not care about anything except shedding blood. Why shed blood? What's the motive behind that? Because his forefathers were killed in the Battle of Badr. Revenge, this was a tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye, according to Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And the evidences of this is profound. On the 10th of Muharram, when Abu Abdullah alayhi salam stood there in front of his enemies, and he said, why do you do this? Look towards the east and the west, and you will not find a single character on this earth like myself, a person who is, number one, a direct descendant of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the son of Fatima al-Zahra. We are Ahl al-Wahi. Why is it that you stand against us? They said, it is because your forefathers killed their forefathers. It was all about vengeance. When the head of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam was brought to Yazid, he said, I wish my forefathers were alive to see that I have avenged them. So here, these groups of ulama came forward and said that yes, Imam Husayn alayhi salam's motive was one thing, but then the motive of Yazid ibn Muawiyah was revenge, and that's all it was. That's why the whole event of Karbala took place. With regards to the scholars of the Shi'i madhab, we say, look, if you want to understand the motive of Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam's uprising and insurrection against Yazid ibn Muawiyah, refer to his own words. Why don't you go listen to what Imam Husayn alayhi salam has to say with regards to this area or this issue? Abu Abdullah alayhi salam comes forward and he says, إِنِّي لَمْ أَخْرُجْ أَشَرًا وَلَا بَطِرًا وَلَا مُفْسِدًا وَلَا ظَالِمًا وَإِنَّمَا خَرَجْتُ لِطَلَبِ الْإِصْلَاحِ في أمة جد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. He says the reason as to why I am leading an uprising against Yazid is not for the sake of fun and joy. It's not for the sake of starting sedition and causing fasad within the community. Nor is it for the causes of oppression or for the sake of starting, for example, a war, a civil war amongst the Muslims. It is for the sake of reforming the ummah of my grandfather Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. One of the methods that he employs is that he sends towards the city of Kufa Muslim Ibne Aqeel. And when he embraces Muslim Ibn Aqeel and he sends him towards Kufa, the way he presents Muslim Ibn Aqeel is amazing. It's phenomenal how he characterizes and identifies Muslim Ibn Aqeel. They say Muslim, where he was born during the Bi'tha or during the Risala of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. So he was alive when the Prophet was alive. He was roughly the same age as Imam Hassan alayhi salam and Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. So he was of the same age and they lived through many of the different adversities during the early times of the religion of Islam, during the Khilafah of Amir al-Mu'mineen and so on and so forth. They say, some of the historians explain that he was alive during Futuhat al-Makkah. So when Mecca was conquered, Muslim was very much alive. They say that perhaps he was at the state of being a sabi, mumayyiz, meaning that he was a child, but he was able to differentiate right from wrong. And if that was the case, then he would have been definitely one of the companions of Rasulullah. So you're looking at a senior, perhaps a senior figure, someone in their early or late or mid-60s. When he sends Muslim, what's interesting is there are certain incidences that take place during the time of Rasulullah between him and Muslim ibn Aqeel. There's one incident that takes place between Rasulullah and his father Aqeel. He comes to his father one day. Rasulullah comes towards his father. He says, Ya Aqeel, I love you 2 portions of love. It's a very interesting hadith. He says, I love you hubbain, 2 loves. One love I love for who you are, Aqeel. And the second love for the love of Abi Talib that he has for you. So I love you for who you are, and I love and the love that I have for the love that Abu Talib has for you. Interestingly, when he mentions these 2 things, he then says, Ya Aqeel, inna waladak maqtulun linusrati waladayya Husayn alayhi salam. He says that your son, Muslim, will one day be killed for helping my son, Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. It's a very powerful expression that he presents. He doesn't say that one day your son will be born and that son will be killed helping my son. He says, no, your son, right now, your son will die helping my son, and may God you have mercy upon you. The second incident, they say he one day walks into the house and he sees Muslim being at the khidmah, being at the service of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. When he sees this, that Muslim is at the service of his master Abu Abdullah, he begins to cry. فَبَكَى بُكَاءً شَدِيدًا. He cries profusely. And then he sits down and he begins to recite the maqtal of Muslim, of what happens in Kufa. The prophecies of Karbala, the prophecies of Kufa happened well before, during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Muslim is sent towards the city of Kufa. Now when Muslim is sent towards the city of Kufa, he enters Kufa and he goes straight into the house of Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. The avenger of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam, Mukhtar al-Thaqafi has a pivotal role in the events leading up to Karbala. He hosts Muslim. Now Muslim enters Kufa on the 5th of Sha'ban and he is killed today the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, the day of Arafah. So for about 2 months, roughly 2 months, 4 days, 3 days, he was there in Kufa. So it's not the case where he enters Kufa and he's killed within a matter of days. No, he was there for a good roughly 65 days. In these time, he goes and he stays in the house of Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. Now all of the Shia, they come towards him. When they come towards him, they enter, and Muslim begins to recite the letter that he has been given by Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, that I am sending towards you, ba'ithun ilaykum, akhi wa ibn ammi wa thiqati ahle bayti. Muslim, Ibne Aqeel, that I am sending towards you my brother, the son of my uncle, my cousin, and a trustworthy source from my family, wa thiqati ahle bayti. Here the ulama, they dissect this section. What does it mean, thiqati ahle bayti? You know, some people have the question. They say, Muslim ibn Aqeel, because of the way he is characterized by Abu Abdullah, does this prove that he was the best amongst the shuhada? That he was second after Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam? Some of the ulama came forward and said, there's no need to go that far. We can't compare the ranks of the shuhada, especially amongst the Bani Hashim. Muslim has his position, Abu Fadl al-Abbas has his position. He says, imagine a teacher when he has many students. When the teacher says that this person is my student, and that person is my student, and that person is my student, and I have, for example, 7 students, that doesn't mean that, for example, all of them, it doesn't mean that one is better than the other, especially when they disperse in different areas of the world. And they say that I studied under Fulan ibn Fulan. It doesn't mean that they were the greatest of students. It just means that they were taught by that person. Likewise here, Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, when he has many shuhada under him, it doesn't mean that they are all of different, they're all of the different levels. We can't say for sure if Muslim ibn Aqeel was the greatest of amongst the shuhada. We say that he has a very strong pivotal position in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here, the other thing that the scholars identify here is that when he says thiqati ahle bayti, it means that he is trustworthy in all areas. Not just in areas of politics or in areas of sociology or social affairs. No. Muslim ibn Aqeel is the one that I rely upon. He is my safir, my wasi, as in my representative in Kufa. When he was there in the house of Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, they all came towards him and they all gave bay'ah to him on behalf of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. He was the active representation of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. So they all started coming towards the house of Mukhtar al-Thaqafi and they all gave bay'ah to Muslim ibn Aqeel with the hope that they will stand against Yazid ibn Muawiyah. 18,000 members came and gave bay'ah to Muslim ibn Aqeel. 18,000. That's not a small figure. Now, Nu'man ibn Bashir, the wali or the governor of Kufa, when he hears that the people are secretly, even openly, are giving bay'ah to Muslim ibn Aqeel, he's threatened. So he begins to threaten the Muslims. How dare you go against the Amir, Yazid ibn Muawiyah? But his threats are there, ignored. He doesn't have much power. In fact, he's very weakened by the behavior of the Muslims. The news reaches Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Yazid now, he realizes that he's losing grasp of Kufa. What does he do? He employs Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. He tells Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he says, Ibn Ziyad, go towards Kufa. I am now making you the official governor of Kufa. Go and remove the current governor and take his place. When Ubaydullah is appointed as the governor of Kufa, he immediately leaves Basra and he goes and he heads towards Kufa. The narrations say that he does not even rest during the way. Day and night he's traveling. He left with a group of companions. Each and every single one of them had to leave him at one point or another. They said to him that we're tired, we need to rest, we need to eat, we need to do this, we need to do that. He said, you stay, you rest, and then you join me in Kufa. He proceeds and he enters the city of Kufa. When he enters the city of Kufa, what's interesting is that he enters disguised. So he wears an amama, he wears a hoodie, he covers his face. When he enters the streets of Kufa, the people mistaken him as Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. They think that it's Imam al-Husayn. He enters the streets of Kufa. He enters Kufa and he goes directly towards the palace, the governor's palace. He sees the tarheeb, he sees the welcoming that he gets. he gets from the people. And he feels threatened. This is the welcoming that Abu Abdullah is getting from the people of Kufa. He had to employ certain tactics to try and break the loyalty that the people had for Abu Abdullah. So he heads towards the castle, the palace of the governor. When he enters the palace of the governor, he then exposes himself. The people see that it's Ibn Ziyad, and they all disperse. He rests for the night. The next morning, he delivers speeches. He begins to threaten the people. You dare go against the Amir? If you stand against Yazid ibn Muawiyah, we will kill you. And that's exactly what he did. He took a bunch of people, many people, numerous people, various people, and he killed them, arrested them and killed them straight away. He went towards the Urafa of Kufa, the tribal leaders of Kufa. He bribed many of them. He killed many. And slowly the loyalty that the people of Kufa had, it began to dissipate. Mukhtar saw that his position as a host of Muslim was now under threat. So Muslim leaves Mukhtar's home and he goes towards the home of Hani ibn Urwa. Hani ibn Urwa hosts now Muslim ibn Aqeel, but no one knows of this. This is very secretly done. He travels during the night, he enters Hani's house. No one saw where Muslim went. So no one in Kufa knows where exactly Muslim ibn Aqeel is. They say there was another person in the house of Hani ibn Urwa, a man by the name of Sharik al-Harith. Now, according to the narration, Sharik al-Harith, he was one of the companions or one of the travel buddies of Ibn Ziyad. He accompanied Ibn Ziyad to a certain degree, and then he came towards the city of Kufa after Ibn Ziyad had arrived. He came and he stayed in Hani's house. Now, deep down, he was the Shia of Ali alayhi salam. But eventually he became sick. When he became sick, Ibn Ziyad found out, so Ibn Ziyad said, let me go visit him. He's a friend of mine. He accompanied me along the way. So he came towards Hani's house to meet this person. When he met him, he saw that the behavior of the people, Hani and Sharik, is a bit odd. He didn't know that Muslim was in the house. There's a bounty on Muslim. So he saw their behavior and he realized that something is off and he immediately leaves. Then he investigates and he inquires. He pushes certain buttons, he pulls some strings, and he realizes that Muslim is now in the house of Hani ibn Urwa. Hani is arrested and then eventually he's martyred as well. He's killed by the hands of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. They say that when Muslim finds out that his location has been exposed, he mobilizes an army very quickly and he goes towards the mansion of Ibn Ziyad with the hope to finish the battle against him and Ibn Ziyad. So he mobilizes his legion, his battalion, and he goes towards the palace. When he comes towards the palace, there's a fierce fight between Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, his soldiers, and the soldiers of Muslim. Eventually what happens is Ibn Ziyad employs certain strategies, certain tactics, and he overwhelms the tribal leaders. He bribes some of them, he threatens some of them and their families. Slowly they begin to leave Muslim. Sometimes mal can be very corruptive. And so they began to leave Muslim ibn Aqeel. The famous narration that when Muslim begins to recite salah, he turns around before his salah begins, he sees 30 people with him. Once he finishes his salah, he turns around, he sees that he is abandoned. Muslim is now left alone, stranger in the lands of Kufa. Once upon a time, he used to be fighting alongside Amir al-Mu'mineen in the Battle of Siffin. Same Kufa, he was one of the princes of Kufa. And now he is a stranger in the lands of Kufa. He begins to walk in the streets of Kufa and then he comes towards a house. He sits by the house. The house belongs to Taw'a. Taw'a, very beautiful history behind her background. They say that she was the slave of Ash'ath ibn al-Qais. Who's Ash'ath ibn al-Qais? Ash'ath ibn al-Qais was one of those who instigated the assassination of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. It was him, Muawiyah and Ibn Muljim who plotted against the killing of Imam alayhi salam. Ash'ath ibn al-Qais, his daughter Ju'da married Imam Hassan alayhi salam. And she was the one who assassinated Imam Hassan alayhi salam. So a very nasty personality. Taw'a was his slave, but she was a believer in Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. But her son wasn't a believer in Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. So you can have a family member who is a Shia, hardcore Shia, supporter of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, but she's surrounded by individuals who are kuffar. Just like how Fir'aun was a kafir and his wife was a mu'min of Musa alayhi salam. The son of Taw'a, when he realizes that Muslim is in his house, he goes to Ibn Ziyad and he exposes the location of Muslim ibn Aqeel. A legion is sent towards the house of Taw'a. Muslim fights them. There's a massive battle that takes place, a fierce battle that takes place. Muslim loses. He is beaten. He is wounded. When they see that he has become tired, they overpower him. Then they drag him towards the house or the palace of Ibn Ziyad. They drag him up the stairs into the roof of the palace. When he is brought towards Ibn Ziyad's presence, there's a conversation that takes place between the two. And this is a profound conversation that takes place between the two. Between Muslim and Ibn Ziyad. A profound, a phenomenal dialogue. Something that we should be aware of. They say that when he comes towards the presence of Ibn Ziyad, one of the soldiers that was there, he begins to prod Muslim. He says, Muslim, you're in the presence of the Emir. Give your salams to the Emir. Muslim responds, he says, he is not my Emir and he will never be my Emir. This is an insult towards Ibn Ziyad. Especially in his final moments, people would be begging for their lives in such a moment. Muslim says, he is not my Emir, he will never be my Emir. Upon which Ibn Ziyad responds, he says, well, it doesn't matter. In one way or another, you will be killed. And I will kill you. Your life is in my hands. And there is no way that you will leave this. There is no way that you will leave this interaction alive. Upon which Muslim responds, and he says to him, he says, Ibn Ziyad, you think I worry about death? It says, far better people have come before me who have been killed by far worse people than you. It says, you are a man of bloodshed. You're a man of domination, a man of punishment, a man of cruelty. And I pray to Allah that I am killed by your hands so I can seek martyrdom by your hands. Now what's beautiful here is that when Muslim characterizes Ibn Ziyad with such characteristics, this is again an insult towards Ibn Ziyad. Today, according to Ilm al-Akhlaq, there are certain things that we identify as naturally good and naturally evil. Our fitrah tells us that there are certain things which are good and there are certain things which are evil. Saying the truth, charity, being helpful, humility. I don't need Islam telling me that this is good. My fitrah tells me this is good. Likewise, bloodshed, torture, punishment, all of this is evil. Yes, lying, dhulm, oppression, all of these things are naturally evil. Fitri, it's evil. When you have a tyrant, a despot of a country, a person who massacres his own people, in public he'll come, he'll stand in front of the media and he will say that we support our people. He'll never confess the idea that he's a despotic, a person who engages in genocide, for example. Never will he say this and embrace these words in public. Why? Because naturally he knows that this is evil and this is wrong. When Ibn Ziyad is characterized by Muslim in such a way, it angers him. Yes, he is a despot and yes, he is an oppressor. But when he is characterized by these words or by these descriptions by Muslim, he feels threatened and he lashes out to Muslim ibn Aqeel. He says, you are the one who's disobedient. You have stood against the Emir of your time. A person who stands against the hukum of their time deserves to be killed. You have abandoned your Emir and you came into Kufa and you brought with you disunity and dissension amongst the people of Kufa. So you found here, Muslim responds by saying that you are a liar, Ibn Ziyad. You are a liar who is not deserving to be the representative of the Emir. Beautifully, Ibn Ziyad, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says this, he says, Ya Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prevented you from becoming the Caliph, or Abu Abdullah from becoming the Caliph. Why? Because you are not deserving of it. In fact, Allah has given it to those, Allah has made the custodians of the Caliph or Khilafah to those who are more deserving. So Muslim says, who are those who are more deserving of the Khilafah? He says, Yazid ibn Muawiyah. He says, Yazid is more deserving. Muslim replies, he says, Alhamdulillah, I'm glad that Allah is my judge between you and I. Then he says to Muslim, he says, do you think that you are more deserving? The Ahlul Bayt is more deserving of the Khilafah? He says, I certainly know, I have certainty that we are more deserving of the Khilafah. Then he says to him, he says, Muslim, why did you even come to Kufa? Kufa, people were living in harmony, there was unity. You came you came and you caused dissension within the people, in the hearts of the people. You divided the people, you divided their opinions. They were at once unity and now you've disunited them. Why? He says, you are a liar again. We have not disunited the people of Kufa. When you came towards power, or when you took on power, just like your father, and just like the father of Yazid ibn Muawiyah, all of you broke Kufa, and you caused disunity amongst the people of Kufa. And he begins to dissect the different movements of the Bani Umayyah, starting from the time of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. He says that when Muawiyah came into power, he appointed your father Ziyad ibn Abi. You see, when Muslim begins to speak about Ibn Ziyad's father, Ziyad ibn Abi, this was a direct insult towards Ibn Ziyad. Why? Because his father Ziyad was known to be the son of an adulterer. Ziyad ibn Abi, Ziyad the son of his father. And this was very well known amongst the people of Kufa. This was very well known amongst the Muslim empire. That Ziyad, no one knew who his father was. Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan came forward and he said that if I make you the governor of Kufa, Ya Ziyad, I will say to the people that you are the son of Abi Sufyan, that you are my brother. And of course, they say that Ziyad one day sends a letter to Aisha, Al-Mu'minin Aisha. When she reads this letter, she responds. But they say that when she responds the letter, she doesn't know how to refer to him. She said, if I refer to him as Ziyad ibn Abi Sufyan, that's a lie. She says, if I refer to him as Ziyad ibn Abi, it's the truth, but it's an insult towards him. And he may not take it the right way. So she thinks, she ponders, and then she says that this risala, this book, or this letter is from Aisha Al-Mu'minin to her son Ziyad. Ila waladiha Ziyad. And she escapes from insulting Ziyad. When Ziyad reads this letter, he smirks. They say, why are you smiling and laughing? He says, because she's very diplomatic in her words. So even he realizes that Aisha was able to kind of circumvent the different insults that was relayed towards Ziyad ibn Abi. Muslim says, your father was Ziyad. Muawiyah appointed him. And when your father came into power, he buried the truth. He oppressed the people. He killed the Shi'as of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Why did Muawiyah pick Ziyad? Because Ziyad had hatred towards Ali ibn Abi Talib. He knew exactly which tribe had affiliation towards the Imam alayhi salam. So he was able to come towards these tribes and put pressure on them. Many were killed, many were bribed, many were exiled, many were imprisoned, all because of Ziyad ibn Abi. His son Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad was no different. They say, Muslim says that he was qutila khiyarahum, that he killed the best amongst the companions, like whom? Hujr ibn Adi, Al-Kindi. Hujr, they say that when he was captured, he was taken to a land just a few kilometers outside of Syria. A man who was known to be a loyal supporter of Ali alayhi salam. When he was taken towards this land, a delegation was sent towards Muawiyah. We've captured Hujr, a staunch supporter of Ali alayhi salam. What do we do with him? He says, make sure that he curses Ali alayhi salam. If he curses Ali, let him go. There are witnesses there that will record the fact that he cursed Ali alayhi salam. They say to him, Hujr, curse Ali alayhi salam. He says, you want me to curse the one that I praise and praise the one that you curse? And you want me to curse the one that you praise? He says, it's never going to happen. I will never curse the one that I praise. They said to him, well, then you will face and you will see the heat of the sword. He says, it doesn't matter. They kept him secluded for a few days. In those days, he engaged in ibadah. Just moments before he was executed, he asks them, let me recite my final salah, 2 rak'ah salah. He recites his 2 rak'ah salah. They tell him that this salah has no benefit for him whatsoever. In his final moments, he says to them, I have one request. They say to him, what is it? He says, you've captured my son. Bring my son in front of me and kill him in front of my eyes. He said, why do you want us to kill your son? He says, so I know that he is in the state of fada. He is loyal towards Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And his loyalty does not waver towards Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. They slaughtered his son and then they killed him. They killed Hujr ibn Adi al-Kindi. When Aisha found out that Muawiyah killed Hujr ibn Adi al-Kindi, she said, Wailul Muawiyah. Curse be on Muawiyah for killing a person like Hujr ibn Adi al-Kindi. She had respect for Hujr, let alone the A'immat al-Athhar that were there at the time. Then he says that your father Ziyad was the one who killed the best amongst the companions. And istabqa shararahum, and he made sure that evil remained within the lands. Umar ibn Harith, for example, one day comes towards Muawiyah. He says, Muawiyah, I will fabricate or I will concoct a hadith for you. He says, which hadith? The one who stands against the Imam of his time should be killed. A man who is a baghi, who stands against the caliph of the time, regardless if the caliph is good or bad, oppressive or merciful caliph, doesn't matter. As if a person who stands against the caliph of the time should be killed automatically. Why? Because of the fasad and the dissension that exists or is created within the world. Today the Salafis believe in this. The Salafis believe that whosoever stands against the caliph of the time, regardless if the caliph is good or bad, then they are deserving of la'nah. One of the primary reasons to why Imam Husayn alayhi salam is degraded by these individuals is because he stood against Yazid ibn Muawiyah. They said, yes, Yazid was a vile individual, but Imam al-Husayn had no right to stand against the caliph of his time. Why? Because this hadith was concocted in the time of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. And then he says, وَمَالَ اللَّهَ دَوْلَةً, and the Bayt of Allah, the Bayt al-Mal that belonged to Allah and the people, the Muslimin, that was used to enrich the people of Kufa, specifically the rich amongst the Kufa, specifically the Bani Umayyah, you stole from the public treasury. Muslim is saying this to Ibn Ziyad. All of these points, one after the other. Your governors, your Amir took money from Bayt al-Mal and enriched the Bani Umayyah. Beautiful narration. They say one day Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad gives his brother Abdul Rahman ibn Ziyad 20 million dinars. 20 million dinars from Bayt al-Mal. They say Abdul Rahman, he came into public and he would say, my brother has gifted me 20 million dinars. What do I do with so much money? Today, if you were made a millionaire, what would you do with all that money? You wouldn't know what to do with that money. Yes, you'd buy yourself so many things, but then you see and you'll end up realizing that you have much more than you need. He says, I have 20 million dinars. If every day I was given a set amount of dinars for the next 100 years, I would still have a lot in my account. He says, what do I do with so much money? I've even lost sleep having and carrying so much money. They say one day he lost all of it. He lost all that money. Some men came and took it from him. He was seen in the bazaar one day, he was carrying a piece of silver that they usually use to bind the Mus'haf, the Quran. Then a few people came towards him and they said, Abdul Rahman, you went around just a few months ago saying that you had 20 million dinars. What happened to that money? He says, Kullu shay'in halik illa wajha. Everything perishes except for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad supported his own family from Bayt al-Mal. When Muslim Ibn Aqeel begins to expose the sins and the vile behavior of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, some of the silliest things that he has done, some of the most corrupted things that he has done, it enrages Ibn Ziyad. He turns to Muslim, he says, Muslim, wallah, you are a liar. Ma anta wa dhaka ya fasiq. He says, what? He says, how can you take on the responsibility of coming into Kufa and trying to reform Kufa? He says the reason why we came into Kufa, Muslim says this, he says the reason why I came into Kufa was Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. Yes, he reverberates the same words as Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Ibn Ziyad responds, he says, why do you take on that burden? Why do you want to establish peace and sanctity, spirituality within Kufa? He says, because this is a reformation of my, reformation of the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Ibn Ziyad begins to curse him. He says, you are a fasiq. You want to establish sanctity within within Kufa. One day you were from those who used to stay in Medina and you used to drink wine. You used to drink alcohol. When Muslim hears this, he begins to laugh. And he says, me drink wine? He says, you are more deserving of drinking wine than myself. Whatever you say of me, it is not me. You have a vile interpretation of who I am. He says, you speak without ilm. And he goes on and he goes on. He begins to insult Ibn Ziyad. In the end, when Ibn Ziyad hears the words of Muslim, he begins to give la'na upon the members of the Ahl al-Bayt. The la'na on the Prophet of Allah, the la'na on Amir al-Mu'mineen, on Fatima alayhi salam, on Imam al-Hassan, then on Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam. Then Muslim tells Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he says, you are more deserving of this curse than me and my family. In a fit of rage, Ibn Ziyad leaves and he commands his neck for his neck to be struck. They say they came towards him. They came towards Muslim. They exchanged a few words between him and Umar ibn Sa'ad. Umar ibn Sa'ad said to him, Muslim, what are your final requests, if you have any? He says, I am in debt 700 dirhams. Make sure that my wealth is used to pay off my debts. He says, make sure that you tell Aba Abdullah not to come towards the city of Kufa. And make sure that when my body is taken away by Ibn Ziyad, make sure that you bring my body back and bury me. Umar ibn Sa'id comes to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. He says, as for the first condition, his finances, his wealth, well, it's his wealth. Let him do whatever he wants with it. As far as his body is concerned, no, we will not bury his body. As far as explaining to Abu Abdullah not coming towards Kufa, again, that was declined. The neck of Muslim was struck and they beheaded him. When they beheaded him, and at the same time they beheaded Hani ibn Urwa. They took his body and they threw it from the palace and it fell into the streets of the bazaar. Then Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad came forward and he said, tie his body to the horses. And they dragged his body into the streets of Kufa. And it was hung by the leg for many days. They say as Abu Abdullah alayhi salam was making his way towards the city of Karbala, a delegation came towards him and they said to him, Ya Ibna Rasulullah, we've come bearing bad news. We wish to speak to you alone, away from your family. Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, he says, whatever you have to say to me, you can say in front of my family as well. Abu Fadl al-Abbas was there, Aliyun al-Akbar was there, the children of Ali Muhammad were there, the companions were there as well. He says, what is this news that you have for us? He says, we've just come from Kufa, and as we were leaving Kufa, the body of Hani and the body of Muslim were dragged in the bazaar. They say that Abu Abdullah alayhi salam begins to lament and he begins to cry. Then he turns to Zainab. He says, Ya Zainab, bring the children of Muslim. Bring the family of Aqeel. Let me break this news to them. They say Zainab alayhi salam, she summons all the children. But there was one child in particular, the daughter of Muslim. She was Sukaina's age. Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, he sits down alongside her and he begins to caress her head. He begins to stroll his fingers on her hair. She says to him, she says, Ya Abu Abdullah, Ibn Rasulullah, why do you treat me the way you treat the orphans? Why do you caress my hair the way you caress the hair of the orphans? Ya Ibn Rasulullah, something's happened to my father. Tell me what's happened to my father. Abu Abdullah alayhi salam begins to cry. He begins to shed tears. He says, even if your father is not here, Ya Hamid, I will act as your father, and my daughters are your sisters, and my sons are your brothers. He says, Ya Hamid, do not cry, as I will act as your father. She says, Ya Abu Abdullah, tell me what's happened to my father. Abu Abdullah, how can he tell her that her father has been executed by Ibn Ziyad? But he breaks the news to her. He says to her, Ya Hamida, your father's been executed. She begins to cry, she begins to lament. The narrations say that as she cries and laments for her father, when the ladies and the children hear her cries, each and every one of them, one by one, they too begin to cry until Sakina comes towards Hamida. She sits alongside Hamida and she too begins to cry. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون